Welcome to the Monday edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 222. We just had an Easter in Spring edition. It happens here in Connecticut. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. Today's March 21st, 2016.
Okay, as I mentioned, we had snow last night, middle of March. It's Connecticut. And Connecticut's interesting. We get all four seasons every 5 days. Last night was the season of snow. Had a little Easter race through here. What's going on down there in Weatherland, Florida, George?
It's pollen season. The flowers are in bloom. The golfers are out. You can see the full spectrum of men's sports shorts. Pink, green, yellow pants are all the rage
I
now.
thought, boy, when I was golfing years ago, it was still plaid. Plaid's no longer in, huh?
No, it's Florida, Kevin. Florida.
Okay,
Short pants and those visor hats, which I just can't stand on women. But this is not the time to talk about
No,
that.
no. So George and I were sitting down this morning and said, we're sick of talking about Lasaka. We're sick of talking about the big Anglican stories going on in the world, and let's break into something else. I said, yeah, we can break into something else, but let's keep it with accountability. It's one of the big things missing in the church, whether it's Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Anglican, the Episcopal Church. Accountability is something that's not applied very well. And we have some great examples in stories of the last couple months. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the unaccountability of sexual sin. We know people who've overcome alcoholism, gambling, kleptomania, all these different things, and were able to return to
And
ministry.
those are just the bishops.
And those are just the bishops, and have been able to return successfully to ministry and go on to have faithful careers as ministers. I can't think of any example in my life of anybody I know who's overcome an affair or sexual sin and been able to return to a active, vivid ministry without a repeat offense, and it happening again. And I was reminded by this when I was reading about Billy Graham's grandson, Tillian, who, boy, that pollen's just sticking out over there, isn't it? That's right. We'll keep going. And so Tillian has, over the course of a year and a half now, been caught twice having an affair, blames his wife for the affair, was fired from one church. George will give you more details in a second, and hired on by another church. And that said, all is well. He will do great in this ministry here. He's addressed those issues. And lo and behold, another affair. Give us some details, George.
A little bit of background first. The old way the church would handle, not just the Episcopal Church, the Catholic Church, sexual sin was really to ignore it. That's what the whole Catholic clergy abuse scandals were about.
Yes, it
Of
was.
Father so-and-so does something wrong, and rather than being shut up in a monastery for the rest of his life, he's sent to another parish. And I've been covering the Episcopal Church, and I have to tell you, though we do not have as notorious a reputation as the Catholic Church on this point, we are still guilty of this. There are numerous instances of reports of clergy who were engaged in sexual misconduct, the bishop moving them from one church to another, basically to make it go away. Then we went to the other extreme, where an anonymous note slipped into the collection plate was enough to get you suspended. And you were in limbo until the Star Chamber was finished with you. So we sort of bounced around from ignorance to hypervigilance. And the Episcopal Church has done that, the Catholic Church has done that, and the Presbyterian Church has done that. Recently, we have the case of Tully Chervidian, as you mentioned,
Billy Graham's.
Billy Graham's grandson.
Yeah.
He was rector of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in Fort Lauderdale.
Hmm.
a big mega church founded by D. James Kennedy. And about 2 years ago, he there was a scandal where he confessed to the sin of adultery and was let go from the church. But he said, I only committed adultery because I found my wife was committing adultery and I needed the solace and this and that. And after 3 months, he was picked up by another Presbyterian church, Willow Creek, in Winter Garden, Florida.
Hmm.
And now Willow Creek has canned him because it turns out, no, he didn't have an affair in response to his wife's affair. He was having an affairs before that and after that. So his suspension of 3 months from ministry uh, was far.
It's become permanent. Well, he he
It's
had, he
not
had, he
permanent.
had, he had started a ministry called Liberate, which was for exhausted Christians who needed refresher and to get back into things, and that's gone now. That was the consequence for his sin. When I want to talk a little bit about accountability because um, I remember reading some books from Billy Graham early on when I was a Christian, and he said he wanted people to always pray for him. First, that he would never be tempted by money or by the flesh, and he had one rule that he always abided by. He said, "I will never be in a room with a person of the opposite sex alone ever, unless it's my wife." And I will stick to it. He stuck to it for his entire ministry, and we read no salacious tales about Billy Graham, who's 95, 96, 97 now. Nothing. That work, that little um, um, program he put into his ministry was very successful. I remember as a senior warden, we had a rule at our the churches I ran that every office window had to be, or every office door had to have a window. There could be a light glaze on it, but you always wanted to know what was going on behind the window, behind the door, but you didn't know have to know who it was uh, getting counseling. There's These are the things that were programs to help people avoid temptation and avoid sin, where we are to flee from sin. And I was very encouraged to see a person like Billy Graham, who ran a top level ministry for many years and who never fell to the temptation of money or flesh. So it can be done. Can a person who falls be restored to a ministry, George? Is what we're trying to deal with it in this episode.
Well, the answer is I'll give you an Episcopal answer yes and no. I believe that people can be reformed. I believe people can be contrite. I believe they can seek God's forgiveness and start over again. Does that mean they should step back into the post that they had or the same sort of post? No, I don't think so.
Hmm.
Uh, I believe that Tully Trevedian may find an outlet for his Christian witness, maybe as a writer, maybe as a uh, inspirational speaker, somebody who can tell a story about his own life. Should he be put in a position where the same factors that led to his downfall were prevalent before are prevalent again? No. Just as you would not ask an alcoholic who's reformed to go get a job in a bar, I don't think you'd ask someone who has fallen in that area to put themselves in an environment where those temptations are still there. So, can a person be forgiven? I think so. But I think it takes time. I think it takes evidence of contrition. And I think that you need to suffer for the consequences of your acts. God will forgive you, but you still must pay the civil penalty for your crimes.
Well, or civil, or at this point, the clerical. The penalty should be you've lost your ministry,
Mm.
and sin at all levels has consequence, and that's one of those consequences. You are no longer a minister. You have lost your holy orders, but you can be contrite. You can ask forgiveness. You can start to live a righteous life again, and that righteous life becomes your testimony. I used to be a priest. I fell to the flesh. I have been restored, and I've lived a holy life since. I'm no longer a priest because of the consequences of those sins, and that's how I see the go around. I don't see a priest who falls into an affair being able to be restored to holy orders, George.
Well, let's look at the case of Bishop Ball in England.
Mhm.
This is the bishop who is now serving 32 months in prison. He was a very charismatic leader. became a bishop, an assistant bishop, the Bishop of Gloucester, and would do these weekends where he would encourage young men to explore the ministry, and oh, by the way, he would molest them. Well, the scandal was that this was known for about 20 odd years, to one degree or another, and the desire was not to make waves and sort of have him go away. And in fact, he avoided police prosecution the first time around when he promised to leave the country. That fear of scandal, I think, is has led to more evil, I think more consequences than the actual crimes of Bishop Ball.
Well, that's what we talked about last week with Bishop Pike. You know, nobody wanted to deal with it, and they thought the dealing with the scandal at that time would be far worse for the church than any of the consequences, which happened to be wrong. You know, it's one of those things where it's going to bite you in the butt at some point.
And it's also there's this prejudice to think, for some people there is no life outside the ministry. Well, Kevin, I think you can say that you lead a well and full and happy life without being ordained in the Episcopal Church. Is that correct?
I don't want to take the demotion. No, I believe the first order of the church is the lay order, and those of you who have decided to put a collar on are the second order of the church. My vision of the history of the church is full of very faithful, not successful, but faithful lay people. I don't base my ministry on success. I base it on whether I'm being faithful or not. God has to do all the rest.
The Diocese of Texas had their annual convention or assembly about 2, 3 weeks ago. And one of the things they did is they removed, and this was big local news, and we'll get to it on Anglican Ink. They removed the morality clause from the clergy conduct. They had a little statement saying that members of the clergy should live chaste, honorable lives, this, that, and the other. And now, most dioceses have those sorts of things, but they define chastity and honorable conduct differently. Texas just got rid of that whole thing, and the conservatives there basically said, look, we know what's going on here. This is basically opening the door for gay clergy, which we don't allow right now because of their need to be accountable for living a just and moral life. And so eventually the Diocese of Texas is going to have partnered gay clergy, not behind closed doors or wink, wink, nod, nod, we know about it, but as full, welcome, honest to goodness clergy. Because they've decided that having a canon that makes you accountable is not a good thing anymore.
No. And George and I, when we're doing our pre-show, we're discussing this. There are examples in the Old Testament of people, characters of the Old Testament living pretty righteous lives who come into full righteousness. In the New Testament, many were martyred before you got the full story. And so we don't know. There was not a lot of scandalous stuff going on that we are aware of. Certainly, none of Paul's stories wrote about anybody. He never named names. So,
well, Kevin, let's just broaden it. I mean, I think you and I are both agreed on the point that if a minister falls due to sexual sin, he can be forgiven by God, he can be forgiven by the community, but should he be restored to office? I both think we would say no.
No.
Let's look in the secular world. You're a successful businessman. If you had an employee who stole from you, would you would forgive him if he was contrite and this and that, but would you put him back in charge of your petty cash account?
No, of course not.
Why? Are you being mean? Or are you just not putting someone in a place where they will continue to be subject to temptation?
In my point, it's to help him avoid the temptation. My business insurance will cover the loss, but it does not help me to put a person in a position where they will fall. The Bible says one of the worst things you could do is cause another brother or sister in Christ to fall. And you really want to avoid that. And I do everything I can through Anglican TV, Anglican Ink, Anglican Unscripted to not cause anybody to fall. Oh, I could not imagine. But that's just how we run things here. George, we're running up here on about 15 minutes. Kind of been our Monday show. We want to avoid all the Anglican national news and talk about something local. I got to give a great example of Billy Graham and his ministry, and talk about accountability, something that the church national, the whole Catholic Church needs to deal with. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today you've been watching episode 222 of Anglican Unscripted.